Good morning, Quackhawks. We are in Chapter 3 of Outliers. We're going to be talking about gifted students and what it means to be good enough. All right? Come along with me. It's not lost on me that a lot of the people who are going to be watching this are gifted students. They've been in either a GATE program or they're in an honors English class, or for whatever reason they were set aside and told that they were smarter or better or good at school more so than other students, right? And so this is that idea of outliers that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. What is it that makes a student a gifted student? And how do we foster that into not just being a gifted student, but being one of the best and brightest in the entire world, in all of history? And so Malcolm Gladwell does a really cool thing where he looks not at some of the most obvious examples like Albert Einstein, but he looks at a guy who actually went on to a game show. And on that game show, he did incredibly well. And so this guy has this super high IQ. They say it's 30% higher than even Albert Einstein. He took an IQ test and he got every question right. So they gave him a harder IQ test and he got every question but one right. I didn't even know that there were higher IQ tests, right? And so with this, we have this idea, wow, he's a genius. He's clearly one of those special students, one of those ones that just gets it. And then Malcolm Gladwell, puts it side by side with a basketball player. Why is it that the world's Maple. We put it right next to this idea of a basketball player. Why is it that the world's best basketball player isn't also the tallest? If being tall makes you significantly better at basketball and makes it a lot easier to be good at basketball, why is the best basketball player not just the tallest basketball player? Why is it that the most brilliant people aren't necessarily the ones with the highest IQs? Why is it that outliers aren't always the people that we expect them to be? And so I look at you and the fact that many of you are very gifted students. You've been told that you are gifted for a long time in your life, and you've been set apart and given some sort of special treatment, right? And because of that, you're probably going to do better in school and better at college and better at work than many of your peers. But it's just like being tall. If you could be 6'3" and still be a good basketball player, then that's all you need. If the highest IQ that you need to go to a great school is 130, then that's all you need. This concept of good enough, right? And then once you get into that top tier of good enough, other things start to become important. The things that matter aren't ever just one metric. It's never just one thing that we're looking at and saying, wow, this person's IQ is brilliant, so let's give him the best job in the world, right? Let's pay him the most amount of money, or her the most amount of money, right? That whole idea is bunk. When you look at things like sports, it's not just somebody who's the biggest that wins. It's not just somebody who's the tallest that wins. It's all of these attributes that start to come together, right? And so when we look at that, I say, wow, I have a lot of really brilliant students, but I don't really care as much about brilliance as I do about creativity. And that's exactly what Malcolm Gladwell encourages us to do. So there's this idea, and maybe you heard about it in that young adult book, Divergent. There's a divergence test. A divergence test gives you something simple like a Reese's peanut butter cup and a cleaning cloth and says, what can you do with these two things? List everything that you can come up with that you can do with those two things. They gave these divergent tests to people in gifted programs, and they noticed that some students could write forever. They could just go on with new creative ideas. Well, you could use the cleaning cloth to cover yourself if you're naked and somebody pantsed you. You could use the cleaning cloth, of course, to wipe down your phone, and you could use a Reese's peanut butter cup to survive on a stranded desert. You could use a Reese's peanut butter cup to barter if you were ever in jail, right? You come up with all these creative ideas, and you could just keep going in different contexts. Then they also noticed that people with exceptionally high IQs would do very poorly on divergent tests. They would answer questions very simply and straight to the point. You can eat a Reese's peanut butter cup. You can clean things with a cleaning cloth. And that's it. So this idea of creativity and divergence is actually what they noted was setting people apart after they had already cleared that certain threshold of good enough. If you're 6'3", you could probably play basketball. But after that, you've got to be good at shooting. You've got to be good at blocking. You've got to be good at running. You've got to be good at rebounds. All of those things start to matter. If you're under 6 foot, it can be very, very difficult to be any kind of good basketball player. So there are these metrics that we use to determine what is good enough. Now, we're going to take a quick shift of topic into a totally different area. I talked about this last night on my stream, and it's the idea of how do we shop ethically in the midst of this pandemic? If everything is going to crap and you can't go to Target anymore, you can't go to Walmart anymore, you can't go to your local store, you have to buy things online. And if you haven't heard, a lot of people are actually protesting to no longer, or doing strikes, to no longer work at Amazon because the conditions are terrible. People are striking at Target. People are striking even at Costco, which is known for treating employees very, very well, because the situations that we're in aren't necessarily good or ethical for the employees that we're calling essential workers. So these people are striking. This brings us to the idea, how do we support ethical decisions when we're kind of just stuck at home? I can't eat only the best foods if there's going to be a food shortage. Maybe I have to buy cheap frozen food that I know doesn't treat the farmers or workers or animals well, right? So how do I make an ethical decision within that context? And that's where I want to tie this back together with what it means to be good enough, right? So yesterday I spent some time just looking through my Amazon cart. I didn't want to buy anything off of Amazon, so I went down one item at a time. And the first item was dog food. I thought, well, I could buy dog food at Costco. I like Costco better than Amazon. I know that they treat people better than Amazon does, so maybe I can get that at Costco. But can I do one better? Maybe I can find a place online that isn't Amazon that does support some of the things that I think are ethically important. Maybe they're fair trade. Maybe they are cruelty-free. Maybe they are a better source of food for the animals or whatever, right? So I decided to look online for a store that wasn't Amazon. And I ended up finding a website that actually had some of these all-natural food sources for dogs, and I decided I would order from them. And I started going through all of this list. I had nothing but time, so I figured might as well. And I started going through everything on my list. Shoes, socks, anything that was on my Amazon wish list. I then searched the internet for ethical solutions for that. The clothes that I wear, the food that I eat, all of those things. And I found that there were always options, but it started to become very, very difficult. It was quick to say, I don't want to shop at Amazon, so maybe I'll shop at Target. I don't want to shop at Target, so maybe I'll shop at Costco. But then when everything's shut down, where do I go? What do I do? What's my next step? So I had to realize that there was a line. There was a point in which it was good enough. I had made a better ethical decision, and I should be allowed to celebrate the pride that I get for making that ethical decision, right? So I should be able to say, this is actually a really good choice that I made, and that was good enough for now. Maybe next week I can put more time or effort into it, or maybe later on down the line I have more money, and so I can support more local businesses or spend a little bit more on dog food or on my personal food or on my clothing. But right now, with the context that I have, I had to weigh whether or not something was good, ethical, treated well, right? Treats employees well, versus whether or not it's expensive and how difficult it is to get, how much time it is to put in to get those things. And as I weighed those things back and forth, I came to a point in which it was good enough. In the same way, I want to encourage you guys, as we're reading this book, Outliers, that it's not a matter of suddenly becoming the world's most brilliant person. That's not what gets you to the point where you are an outlier or an exceptional person. What gets you there is every day being good enough, pushing yourself to be a little bit better so that you qualify for whatever the next highest rank is. You can't be any taller than you are right now. Like, without special surgeries, which I'm sure would be very expensive and difficult and probably unethical, you can't be necessarily any taller than you are right now. So you can be at least more well-read. You can spend today reading one chapter of a book, and that is good enough. And if that book isn't at your reading level, at the 10th or 11th or 12th grade reading level, then you can go back and start reading a 5th grade reading level book. And that is good enough. That's significantly better than simply not participating. And all of those things in which you qualify for the good enough ranking, you are now able to access a whole new world of possibilities. If you are 6'3", you can play basketball, and it is relatively easy. If you are extremely flexible, then you could be a gymnast, and it would be relatively easy. You qualify by simply being good enough. So you have to ask yourselves, in what areas am I good enough to start being an expert? To start pushing myself and putting more time and effort and energy into it. It's not necessarily everyone who's going to be able to be anything in the world, right? If I am very, very large and maybe I don't float very well, I'm not going to be the world's best swimmer, right? But there are certain areas in which I qualify as simply good enough. I think that it's important, especially this week, as we think of the idea that not okay can be okay. It's also important to realize that good enough is good, and that you can stop and look at the context you're in and realize what areas you qualify as good enough. Pat yourself on your back for all of the things in which you have done good enough, all of the things in which you qualify for access to all of the amazing things in the world. So, with that being said, snap your quacks, flap your jacks, and don't forget to yell quack.